industries, but state by state. Hey, Pro-Life Gen, it's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this new episode of How to Win This Week on the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. As you know, these are short episodes. They aren't longer episodes where I interview other pro-life leaders and talk about different strategies. These are episodes where I talk to you about breaking news, things that's happening in the pro-life movement, and give you some tidbits of how you can get active right in your community, right in your state. I want to talk about the spring state legislative session, which pretty much just wrapped up in most states across the country. Hopefully, by the end of this, it will encourage you to get involved with our team at Students for Life Action or with any state pro-life organization where you live to start demanding that your state policymakers actually act pro-life. As you all know, as we're heading into a post-Roe America, as we're waiting for the Dobbs decision, the role of state legislators is going to become even more important because the states will be able to decide the legality of abortion where you reside. Something that Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby has been very sad and upset about, you're welcome, for the past several years, has been the fact that we have been winning. The pro-life movement has been kicking the abortion industry's butt in state capitals across the country with introducing pro-life laws and actually seeing pro-life laws get enacted. So this year, as of mid-April, 536 pro-life bills were introduced. Last year, there was about 663 pro-life bills introduced in 2021. Over 100 of those laws were actually signed. So they were enacted. They're on the books in states across the country. It's been amazing to see the momentum in states across the country. This was a record year, especially when we were talking about protections that were introduced, laws that were introduced that provide early protection. So first protections for children in the first trimester. I think a lot of this was kind of spurned on from the Texas heartbeat law, which was signed into law in September 1st, and it was enacted, went into effect. We saw a lot of state legislators immediately say, well, we can be the next Texas. We can't let Texas out pro-life us. It's been incredible to see how much legislation has been moving forward in our states. In fact, this year, Students for Life Action had to engage in more than 30 states in legislative battles. Millions of phone calls and text messages were sent out. Emails were sent out to pro-lifers and voters in states across the country. Our own team helped to introduce or lobby intensely for more than 15 bills. And we actually saw some of those bills become law, especially in Oklahoma, where our Life at Conception Act was just signed into law. It's the second state. Last year, Arkansas was the first state to enact this law. Oklahoma will be the second state. And it was amazing to see Planned Parenthood shock and dismay immediately ensue after the Life at Conception Act was signed into law, which protects all children, after they've been conceived, not just children who can feel pain. This is a big part of Students for Life Action's protection at conception agenda. And you'll see us using this hashtag a lot of, while we support legislation that saves any amount of lives in the womb, we support legislation that bans abortion at 20 weeks or 15 weeks. Our goal in the pro-life movement, though, isn't a second trimester or third trimester abortion ban. Our goal in the pro-life movement is a complete ban on abortions, protecting all children in the womb, no matter their circumstances of conception, because we know at that moment of conception, when sperm and egg unite, a unique co-living human life has been conceived, and the value and the dignity of that life does not change as that child gets older or as different abilities develop in that child. So we want to see the strongest pro-life protections put in place across the country. In fact, the LA Times recently just wrote an article about the shift that we're seeing in state houses across the country. Pro-life laws being introduced and being signed that do not have exceptions for conceptions that occur in the terrible circumstances of rape and incest. And in fact, the LA Times contacted us saying that they believed Students for Life was one of the leading reasons this has come into effect and is mainstream in the pro-life movement. I don't know if that's true. I think it's, very consistent with where we've been this entire 50 years of our pro-life movement, but very much in favor of seeing strong protection at conception laws being introduced and enacted in states across the country. It's truly a historic moment. But this is important for us as pro-life activists as we think about the legislative session coming up in January 2023. Because as we all know, we're awaiting, eagerly, impatiently awaiting the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court this summer, most likely in June. For many years, and really for decades, we've heard state legislators and even federal legislators and lawmakers kind of use the Supreme Court as a crutch or as an excuse for why they may campaign pro-life, but not really do much to protect lives. And they'll say, well, it's because the Supreme Court. Well, we're not going to be waiting at the doors of the Supreme Court anymore. Now is the time to act, to get involved. And you can do it as a legislator, as a lawmaker, not only to restrict the supply, but also restrict the demand for abortion. And there's a lot of different laws that can be introduced. Supply types of laws are ones that force abortion facilities to pass and have common sense safety mechanisms to making sure that, just like how a women's hair care salon or a dog grooming business are inspected, abortion facilities have to be inspected. Or they can restrict a certain type of abortions from being committed in the state. But then the demand laws that can be introduced are laws like EMMA, the Every Mother Matters Act, that was written by our friends at Human Coalition Action, which really tries to tear down the information barrier that women have to really show women all of the nonviolent resources they have in their communities. Similar to some of the legislation we just saw introduced as Students for Life Action inspired bill in the House of Representatives that would demand that college campuses just have to tell pregnant and parenting women and students what their rights are. That's significant. It doesn't cost a lot of money, so the fiscal conservatives can be happy. But this is significant because we know as Students for Life and pro-life activists that far too few people know about the actual resources, whether you're on campus or whether they're in the community. So when you hear when you read like the Guttmacher Institute or, some ABC or CBS News article about this sweeping pro-life legislation that's taking the country, just know there has been decades of work that goes into this moment. You are absolutely a part of that because when you're on campuses, when you're at your church, your parish, when your community, you're talking about abortion, you're influencing your legislators to actually take a stand. That's why when you sign up to be a Students for Life Action captain or go door knocking or send text messages, you are furthering that agenda and that goal of forcing your lawmakers in your state and here in Washington, D.C. to do everything they can to actually be pro-life and not just say they're pro-life. This is why we engage in the political realm of the pro-life movement, not because this is a political battle, but we know this is one of our areas where we must engage, and when we do engage, we can dramatically impact, decrease the supply and then demand for abortion, which in turn saves lives and protects mothers and families from the violent, predatory abortion industry. So don't lose hope. I know when you talk about politics, we talk about passing state laws, there's some things that just break your heart. We tried to get a heartbeat bill, for example, introduced in Florida this year at Students for Life Action, and we were so close, and then we were undercut by somebody else, and then they introduced a 15-week bill. And while I'm very glad to see that 15-week bill has become law and children who can feel pain will not be allowed to be aborted in Florida, it hurts because we know we could have saved a lot more lives. We could have saved any child who was old enough to have a beating, a detectable beating heart at 6 weeks on. So that we have to save that law for next year. But don't worry, we will be back. We won't give up. And that's the lesson for you today, is to understand the importance of state legislation, how we are winning when it comes to protecting lives at the state houses, the importance of that moment. And then when you get engaged, don't get bogged down in the politics of it. Don't get upset when your specific type of legislation doesn't get through. Work as hard as you can to save as many lives, and you can always come back next year and do more in the off season to elect pro-life, actual pro-life public officials. Primaries are a great way to do that, and convince your legislators and state lawmakers to take a stand.